Good evening and welcome to tonight's July 25th, 2023 council session. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Tauschek.
Here.
Herman.
Here.
Matzdorf. Gilson.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Pankwitz.
Here.
Shulsky.
Present.
Nelson.
Here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Next is the pledge. Please stand. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. I'll second the motion.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Pankwitz.
Yes.
Tauschek.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Shulsky.
Yes.
Gilson.
Motion carried. Thank you. Next item is the audience portion where we ask people to sign in and be recognized by the chair. That's where you do the talking and we do the listening. Tonight, no one signed in. We certainly do encourage people to come forward and tell us what's on their mind. Moving on to item 5 is not needed. No items were removed from the consent agenda. Moving on to item 6, resolutions. Resolution number 12, creating the City of Plymouth Redevelopment Authority, Redevelopment Authority Revolving Loan Fund. I'll ask City Administrator Tim Blakesley to give us a brief summary. Tim.
Sure. So resolution number 12, again, is really an exciting resolution creating the City of Plymouth Redevelopment Authority Revolving Loan Fund. So we had a revolving loan fund in the past, but it did go defunct as a result of state and federal guidelines. Council's now reviewed this 3 or 4 times at this point. There haven't been any changes since the last meeting where the Committee of the Whole reviewed the revolving loan fund, the new program, except that the RDA did approve that program at their last meeting. So the RDA unanimously approved that. So upon council approval, the program will be effective. We do have a second item that I'll just touch on in a minute. That'll be the ordinance change as part of the ordinance number 7. That ordinance change just makes some minor changes to city code. Basically, it switches the city staff member on the revolving loan committee with a member of the RDA. And the city staff member becomes the non-voting manager of the program. So that's how the program's set up. This will result in the revolving loan fund committee not having to have any volunteers step down because of a new RDA member coming on, and the city staff will just help manage the program. And I think that's a good way to go about it. So in general, this revolving loan fund is intended to promote new housing, commercial development, basically all throughout the community. So again, there's not been any changes since the last time this went to the Committee of the Whole, but I'm happy to answer any questions. After this is approved, pending council's decision tonight, we will appoint a member of the RDA to the committee probably at the next meeting, and then we will convene the committee and kind of talk them through this new program and how it's going to work. And we already have some projects that have been kind of pending in the hopper, and I think they're going to be coming along pretty quick. So,
Good, thank you. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve resolution number 12, creating the City of Plymouth Redevelopment Authority Revolving Loan Fund.
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Herman.
Yes.
Shulsky.
Yes.
Pankwitz.
Yes.
Gilson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Tauschek.
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. And moving on to item 7, ordinance number 7, amending section 2-4-3 paren A and paren B regarding the composition of the revolving loan fund committee. Administrator Tim Blakesley touched on that a moment ago. Chair will entertain a motion. If we have additional questions, we can certainly ask Tim. But he explained them kind of 2 for 1 there. So Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 7, amending sections 2-4-3, parent A and B regarding the composition of the revolving loan fund committee.
Second, Hildebrand.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please, on ordinance number 7 amending.
Hildebrand,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Pankwitz,
Yes.
Tauschek,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Motion carried, thank you. Item 8 is a new item, and tonight we will kind of have a tag team between our administrator, Tim Blakesley, and Phil Costin. Some of us have met and worked with Phil for years. Presentation on our TIF, and with that, Tim, I'll turn it over to you, and then you can go from there, please.
Sure. So really, Phil's going to be the star of the show tonight. However, just wanted to give a brief update. I think last year around this time we did have a very similar update on the agenda, but since that time we've had 3 new members on the council. So I think providing this update is very timely, particularly with the closure of TID 4 very imminent. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phil. He's going to kind of give us a financial update and provide some much needed information to council.
All right, thank you everyone. Phil Costin with Ellers. I know I've been in this room many times, so just put it, I've been around a while, so been here often. So I think I recognize many of you, I'm the police chief, and others from previous meetings. I know there's some new members. Our role is varied from community to community that we represent, and that is we get involved primarily in economic development type activities, tax increment districts. We created the 3 districts that you currently have outstanding. I'll touch on each one of those. We issue municipal bonds on behalf of our municipal clients and a host of other things. And we represent only municipalities throughout the state of Wisconsin with our office. But we're based out of Minnesota. Don't hold that against me. I'm a Packer fan right down the road for Sheboygan. So we are really an advocate on behalf of municipalities around the state and really a fiduciary when it comes to working with you. So I'll try to get through this relatively quick. I know Tim is very short on sleep and I don't want to put him to sleep. So we're going to try to walk through this relatively quick. Stop me along the way. I'm more than happy to take questions. There's a lot of material here. The first 10 or 12 pages are really just basics on TIF. You know, what is the TIF? What does it mean? Hold on. All right, I'll do them all. Or I'll just say turn the slide, one or the other. Which one did I have? So I'll continue to talk. So what I'm going to cover today is a number of topics. Tax increment financing is a key component, but I'm also going to talk about what happens when you close out a large tax increment district number 4 that you have currently operating in the city. Thank you, Tim. And you have a unique opportunity that, there we go. A unique opportunity in regards to tax increment district number 4, and some key decisions you're going to have to make as a council in regards to that tax increment district. We're going to talk a little bit about affordable housing, a topic. Doesn't matter if I'm in Wausau or if I'm in Kenosha, it's the same topic. We hear all the time, worker shortage. We talk about affordable housing. How do we bring people in charge of that can fill the factories and do the work that everybody's looking for help? Levy limits really drive budgets. And we're going to talk a little bit about levy limits, restrictions, and capacity expenditure restraint program. They kind of tie hand in hand, and will dictate where you go with your budget. And then kind of in my world, exciting last page, which kind of gives you these highlights of what's coming each budget year. Really a lot of good news and a lot of opportunity that you have that you really should be planning for going forward. So With that, a little bit of basics on tax increment financing. I give this way too often around the state, in different organizations. I can take a full hour to talk TIF if you would like, but again, I'm going to try to bring this together pretty quickly. You can't just create a TIF to create a TIF. When you have 3 existing districts, one I'll call kind of the east side of town where Aurora is, and was created for Sark Quarry and a number of projects over that way. You'll have Masters Gallery, and then you have Sargento. Those are really the 3 tax increment districts that are in place right now. All 3 were as a result of the company or the decision by the council to move forward with development in your community, or to entice development and expansion in your community. So all 3 of those districts had to answer this but-for test. And but-for is the key underpinning of the program. Doesn't matter if the city of Milwaukee is creating a TIF district for Fiserv or the village of Pittsville for a fourplex. It's the same underlying issue you address, and that is, would the development happen without TIF support? And if it would happen without TIF support, then you're really not allowed by statute to create the district. Now, it's not as black and white as that. We kind of break it down and say, there are some gray areas in here. When it happened as proposed, I mean, maybe the expansion would be smaller, at the same time frame, the same property value. So there's a number of gray area topics, but at the end of the day, in all 3 of those cases, your cases, the company came forward to the city and said, we're willing to expand into your community. We have other options out there, but we're going to need help with X, Y, Z to be able to do that. So you became a partner with them in each one of those. TIF works very simply. I know it's complex because of the statute. It is multiple pages long because the law has changed a lot since '76. But it's really simple when you really think about it. If you have 2 properties that are next to each other, one in the TID or one out of the TID, and they're both vacant, and they both have minimal value, just say $10,000 value, you create a district around one parcel, and that's now a new TIF district. They have one parcel, the other one's outside. Just say a $200,000 house is built on each one. The tax rate's the same, exactly the same. The assessment's the same. Nothing changes except for that $200,000 value that was added to each parcel, where the money go changes. In the case of the property that is not in the TID, it gets shared by the county, the technical college, and the city, and the school district, of course. All 4 taxing jurisdictions get their piece of the pie. In the case of the parcel that's in the TIF, that full tax bill stays at the city. All right, so that's the power of TIF. You're able to use the actual full value, the taxes collected, and the full value of that property, and reinvest it into the TIF area. That's the purpose behind it. So you're capturing that development that's occurring in the tax increment district. So using Masters Gallery as an expansion, they had a parcel next to their existing facility that they were going to expand. So we picked up that parcel, and then they built there, and all the development, all the revenue coming from your new development stays in the TIF fund. It doesn't get shared by the county, Penfield College, or school district. That's why they all have a seat at the table as well. So you don't just do this without their support. They are part of the process. There's all kinds of rules and regulations regarding TIF. One key that you're living under right now is that you are what's called TIF'd out. And TIF'd out doesn't sound a bad thing. It just means you've had a lot of success in your tax increment districts. You're at 17.25%. What is that? 17.25% of the full value of the community is located in those 3 TIF districts. So almost 20% is located in those 3 tax increment districts. And to create new districts or amend the boundaries of existing districts, you have to be under 12%. So you're tipped up, meaning you can't create a new district and you can't amend the boundaries of the existing district. Now, new numbers will come out a week from today, and my guess is the 17.25 will jump up a little bit, maybe be a little bit higher even. But you are tipped out And that's why the closure of TIF 4 is so critical. It allows you, once that district is closed out, to be back in the TIF game if you choose. I mean, you can entice another developer or somebody else to come in and work with them by creating a new tax increment district. So you're kind of shut out of the game right now. Another criteria is there's multiple types of TIF districts that can be created. There's mixed use, industrial, blight, rehab, and environmental. They all have to hit a 50% threshold test. And what it is for blight, you need to, or rehab, you need to demonstrate at least 50% of the area as blighted and or conditions where properties need to be rehabbed. And so you need to send a letter out to all the property tax owners telling them that, which is a lot of fun to go to that public hearing. So that's one type. Another is industrial. At least 50% of the area has to be zoned and suitable for industrial. Mixed use has to be a combination of industrial, commercial, and residential. When it comes to residential, newly platted residential, there are some real restrictions around it. So a lot of different types of districts that can be created around the state. And each type of district is treated a little bit different. Some have a 27-year life, maximum life. Some have a 20-year maximum life. As you can see here, the blight and conservation rehab districts have a longer potential life than the other types of districts. Just because if you think about it, you're creating a district, maybe in your downtown, you have to take buildings down first to entice redevelopment. It takes longer to recover from that. So all kinds of rules tied to types of districts. So what can you do in these areas? And what have you done in these areas? Well, you can do traditional public works facilities. So I can tell you with Sargento, when they were going to add on to their headquarters and build, they wanted the road improved by the municipality entering into their facility. That was the main infrastructure that was the requirement of them expanding in the community at their headquarters. And so that's what you pay for: water, sewer, streets, stormwater kind of improvements. You can pay for finance costs. You can pay for purchasing property that could be ultimately sold or provided to a developer for $1 to entice them to come. Professional services costs, folks like us, when we create districts, that gets paid out of that TIF fund, not through the general levy. Some administrative costs, relocation costs, and you can see here, the other one, that's the two that are big on there, cash grants to developers or companies. So you can provide a direct incentive to a company to expand in your community. That's done often, and it requires a development agreement attached to it. And then the other is half-mile radius projects, and that is if you can demonstrate that a public improvement is going to, even though it's outside the tax increment district boundary, is going to benefit the TIF district, a portion of that can be paid for. So think of like a water tower that's not best to be located maybe in the TIF, but outside, a portion of that can be paid for. If you can demonstrate the TIF development was part of the reason the water tower was needed. So a lot of things can happen. What can? You can't construct, expand administrative, police, fire, community, recreational, library, or school buildings. That's a no-no. People get creative. I got creative a couple times. We're not going to get into the situations, but we were able to kind of bend that a little bit and maybe deal with maybe like adding a bay at one fire station for a larger piece of equipment that serves only the new development in the TIF. That kind of thing. But you can get a little creative. But for the most part, they're all no-nos. Expanding facilities, if you're using utility user fees, you have to first use the user fees and then demonstrate you need the need. You can't just pay for Tim's salary under the TIF. I mean, the bottom line is you can pay for administrative costs, but it has to be directly related to work being done in the tax increment district. So a portion of staff time or for city attorneys working on a development agreement in a TIF, that could be allocated back to the TIF. And then costs for newly platted residential development, except mixed-use districts, and there's some, again, as I said, requirements attached all around you, and I work for most of the communities around here. All around you, this is happening right now. People that are not TIF'd out, that have the same needs as you for new housing, more population, are using mixed-use tax increment districts to drive residential development. It's happening in Sheboygan Falls, Elk Harbor Lake, in Polar, believe it or not, in Sheboygan, I mean, all over the area, because they all are looking for housing, more housing stock to bring people into the community. Because if you're like most communities, there's a housing shortage, and then people roll into town and say, okay, there's 3 houses to look after the whole community, and they're gone in a second. So that is happening throughout the state. Once you create a district, you're not done. You have the ability to amend the boundaries periodically. I'm not going to go into all the rules. But again, you can't at the moment because you've chipped out over that 12%. And you're allowed to do a lot of different amendments through the 28 or 27 year life of the district. So questions that we hear all the time that I think that, you know, at the coffee shop and you hear somebody got a tip, you know, like, oh, they're getting a tax break. And the reality is, as I described right away, you're paying, if you're in the TIF or out of the TIF, you're paying the exact same mill rate. Nothing's different. It's where the money goes once it's collected. That's what's different. So no tax break unless, again, you provide a direct incentive to them through the TIF. Is it only for blight? No. That's why we have all these other uses, right? We have mixed use, we have industrial, environmental remediation. There's all kinds of types of districts that are out there. All right, Tim.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, all right. Another frequently asked question, does the TID change the zoning of the property? No, not automatically. However, if you think about it just logically, and you're going to build an industrial park, it's probably farmland assessed property, and then it's going to revert at some point to a new zoning. So it may lead to that, but it doesn't happen automatically. And does it automatically make it easier for municipalities to use eminent domain? No. Absolutely not. There's a whole different statute relative to eminent domain, when it can be used. And that is outside of TIF completely. It doesn't change anything as it pertains to TIF. I'm rifling through this quick. Are there any questions? Should have asked that about 10 slides ago. All right, hearing none, I'll continue. Why should incentives be offered? Well, I talked a little bit about, you know, in each one of your cases, I will tell you all 3 that were initially were drivers were cheese facilities. So it was Masters Gallery, it was Sartori, Great Lakes Cheese, Sargento, all came to the community saying, you know, we want to continue to invest in Plymouth. However, these are the barriers that we have. I've worked with Masters Gallery in Albuquerque, I've worked with Sargento in Plymouth, and I've worked with them in Hillsburg and other places. But in all 3 of their cases here, they came to you and said, we need you to be a partner with us and help us with whatever it was. And that's when the district was created. So it's to spur additional development, job creation, economic activity in the community. And most importantly, what you'll hear once you get back in the TIF game, if you're interested in bringing developers to the table, is nowadays, every deal, as we hear of this, every deal has a gap, right? And a gap is just that. You know, public infrastructure is so outrageously expensive. The cost of money is expensive. Everything's so costly now. We need help in the way of some kind of financial support to make a project work. And then we have to do our due diligence working with you to make sure that's truly the case. That you're not, because you have to sit up here with good conscience and say, we're not just enriching the developer. That there's truly a gap and there's a process to go through to make sure that's the case. So you got to do your due diligence in every case. All right, so what's happening with your districts? You have 3, as I indicated. TID 4, your existing incremental value, again, the simple, the $200,000 house I talked about. So how much has TID number 4 grown in value since it was created? $140 million. So So a lot of development and value that has been created on the tax increment district number 4 over time. That's that's a large district, even if you're talking Milwaukee. That's a very large district, especially in a community this size, and it will have pretty dramatic impacts in a positive way when that district closes out. So I have a separate cash flow I'll talk about a little bit. I didn't include the cash flows for 5 and 6. They got a ways to go. TID number 5, you have incremental value. TID 5 again was Masters Gallery, $18.5 million in value, in new value that was generated. There's a slight positive fund balance of $43,000 at the end of 22, and the maximum life of this district is 2028. This district will, unless there's more expenditures made in TID 5 of the city, will end up in the positive without any problem. I think we had talked about maybe an expenditure on that.
I think so. We already finalized it, and the expenditure period of this is closed now.
Yeah, that's right. 2023 was this year is the expenditure period. So anyway, we think that'll end up positive. TID 6, Sargento, existing incremental value when they did their expansion was $7.6 million. There is a negative fund balance at the end of 22, but we have another 7 years of revenue collection still coming. I think the valuation probably came a little bit less than what they had projected in their development agreement. So keep an eye on TID number 6 as we go along. But that's the existing districts that you have right now. I know the numbers are really hard to see on the screen for those that are out there. Impossible for me to see at this point in my life. So let's talk about TID number 4 because this is really substantial for the city. We are projecting in 2024 you'll have collected enough revenue, that increment, that the new value, the revenue coming off of that new value, to pay off all the remaining obligations and close out the district. And I'll talk about what happens when you close out the district. And you don't have to worry about all the numbers as much as that little box on the bottom that you see at projection. I know it's impossible to unsee numbers. So these are estimates at this point. A lot will change. We have new valuations coming out soon, next week. Tax rates change, property valuations change. So a lot will change. But ballpark numbers here that when the district closes in 2024, there'll be more funds in the TIF account that are needed to pay the obligations in the TIF. So what happens with that residual income revenue is it gets shared to all the taxing bodies. Just like kind of the property owner, right? It all gets shared back to the taxpayers, all the different property tax, overlapping taxing bodies. So I've broken down an estimate. City of Plymouth would be about 800,000, school 871, 578 roughly for the county, and Lakeshore Tech a much smaller amount because their tax base is spread all over, not just the county. So that's money, and I'll talk about that in more detail a little bit, that will be available to the city at the end of 24, ballpark, unencumbered funds, unrestricted funds. Now, we live in a world of levy limits and a lot of restrictions. This is a pot of money that comes into the city that can be deployed a lot of different ways. But it's unrestricted and it's not tied to levy limits. So that makes it a very different kind of pile or pot of money than you usually see for a municipality. So a pretty significant impact when you close out the district. So what does it mean to close out the district? So I did two options. One, no affordable housing extension, and the other one, affordable housing extension. I'll talk about that a little bit. So at the closure, again, there'll be a residual incremental value or incremental revenue of approximately $2.3 million. That's how those numbers broke down. Residual increment will be distributed to all the taxing bodies, the city's portion, roughly $800,000. At the closure, there'll be another couple of positive impacts. There'll be an estimated levy limit adjustment of about 9%, which is about $370,000 plus net new construction, whatever it is that coming year. I know that's a lot to deal with. So in the levy limit worksheet, how it works right now is you have last year's levy, you have, and then you have a few adjustments. You have net new construction, whatever that ends up being, just say 1.5%, 2% of net new construction. And then you have these different adjustments, there's about 15 different adjustments that are available to be taken. You can't take most of them, but there's a few that you could take. At the end of the day, I think I put it on here somewhere. Last year, I think you were at 47,000 roughly, if I recall. So that net new construction number last year allowed you to increase your budget by about $47,000 total. That was your net new construction. When TID 4 closes, it'll be that 40-something thousand if you have some similar net new construction, plus 370,000. So we're talking 400,000 instead of $40,000 when you close out TID number 4. And it's a use it or lose it proposition. Meaning if you don't take the full amount, you don't just get to say, we'll take it next year. It's truly a use it or lose it proposition under levy limits. It's one of the flaws, I think, of levy limits. There's a lot of flaws, but one of the main flaws is it forces you to kind of make this snap decision almost through the process, saying we have to figure out what we're going to do with this money. Now, a lot of communities have used it to establish things that have to go out of the way under levy limits, like establishing the equipment replacement fund, or more of a project equipment fund, or equipment replacement fund, or a capital improvement fund, things like that. And you can find money, you can find a place to put it, but why it's so important in my mind to use it is base building. So the following year's levy limit worksheet will then have that 370, and your net new construction will be on top of that. If you don't take the 370, you're starting back over again. So use it or lose it is really a key proposition here. So that'll happen if in budget year 25, not 24, the one you're working on now. And at the same time that's happening, the city's mill rate is going to drop, even if you take the full 370, because they're only allowed under levy limits to take 50% of the adjustment. So that means, I didn't quantify it here, but your city's mill rate will drop at the same time you're able to grow your budget. It's the one time you can actually accomplish that. And that's why it's such an important point in time for the city when you're closing this district to really do some significant planning, because this is probably a once in 20-year type proposition for the city to have two things happen positive: mill rate down, and your budget being able to go up and deal with some things. Okay, everybody follow that? The second is with the affordable housing extension. So I don't know how much, Tim, you've talked about the affordable housing extension option, but I'll talk about it more in detail. Have you broached it so far?
We've sort of briefly discussed it, but not in a ton of detail.
Okay. So the affordable housing extension, I'll talk about a little bit. About 3 or 4 years ago, the TID law was changed, 5 years ago maybe now. TID law was changed to allow for a 1-year extension where the money has to be used for affordable housing. And it's to deal with this workforce housing issue that we have all over the state. And I'll talk about what you can and cannot do with that in a little bit. So so the city has the ability to take 1 year's, the roughly $2.3 million, and develop a pot of money that can be used for different purposes around the city. Now what that'll do, it'll change the budget year impact from 2025 to 2026. Because now you're delaying the TID closure. Now you're closing the TID, but you're delaying the impact of the TID closure by 1 year. Because you're using 1 more year of revenue from the TID. So all the things I talked about earlier regarding the 370,000, bump in the levy and the mill rate adjustment, that'll be pushed out until 2026. But in return for that, you have a pot of money that can be used to deal with workforce housing issues. So that's the trade-off that you're going to work with. 1 year mill rate adjustment and increasing the levy versus. Everything else kind of holds true. You still get the disbursement of funds at the end of '24, that doesn't change, or the excess increment, that doesn't change. So, TID closure timing. This is actually really good news, I think, as well. Option one, if you stay with option one, no affordable housing, you have to do 2 different resolutions, and this is all this DOR's website. Closure resolution by no later than 4/15/24 is submitted to the DOR. That just tells us we're closing the district out, and we're not going to collect revenue in 2025. And at the same time, once you pass the TID closure resolution, you actually can create new districts already, even though the TIF is still there and you're have it operating. Once you adopt that closure resolution, you're back in the TIF game, meaning that you could close it today, essentially, effectively, and you could be back in the TIF game already if you decided to. So that's not going to prevent you from amending districts or creating new ones anymore, because you're at that point now where you can close the district. Option 2, it's just a 2-step process. You pass the closure of a TIF, and then you have another resolution indicating you're to collect revenue for affordable housing for you. It's just 2 different resolutions that are needed. Our recommendation is you would actually pass, I don't know if I put it on here, I think you would pass the affordable housing extension first, making where you're going to do that, then do the closure. So, bottom line is, you're kind of, as of whenever you want to be between now and April, back in the TIF game, because you don't need to keep the TIF open going forward. So what is affordable housing extension? Really quick, again, if you have a successful TIF, there's 1-year extension for affordable housing. Here are some of the restrictions. At least 75% of the final increment, which is about $2.3 million roughly, must benefit affordable housing, and then there's actual criteria around that I'll talk about a little bit. The remaining 25% can be used to improve housing stock throughout the community for anybody. It's not restricted just to affordable housing. Affordable housing is defined as housing costing no more than 30% of the household gross monthly income. And that includes individuals and or his or her spouse and all minor dependents. Again, you need to get approval by the governing body to extend for affordable housing and afford that resolution to DOR. So what's being done around the state? I'll just start locally. I was about 2 years ago, we closed 6 TIF districts in Sheboygan 2 years ago, and they approved at the same time we closed a 1-year extension for all 6 of their tax increment districts for affordable housing. And they're using that to construct a single-family workforce housing development on the south side of town. That's their primary use for the funds. They'll have restrictions around who can buy the lots and who can develop there. So Sheboygan Falls is going to be closing out to number, I think it's item 3, I think it is. TID 3 in the next year or 2, they're contemplating the affordable housing extension as well, just to be able to deal with a couple of developers that have knocked on the door that want to develop low and moderate income housing through a tax credit program. So there's those kind of projects that are pending in the area. City of Monroe, you can read what they're doing. They have a housing stock renewal program administered by the city, 0% interest loans to those purchasing or residing in a home in the city to make energy efficiency improvements, bring them up to modern standards. La Crosse is doing projects, especially in what they call struggling neighborhoods, poorer neighborhoods, to try to help with the housing stock in their area. Racine is using grants to provide homeowner code compliance, so they have their fire department and their code compliance out in housing stock in neighborhoods, making sure that they're brought up to speed. Appleton is using it for street repairs in low and moderate income neighborhoods because their practice is to do heavy assessments when they do a street repair project. But they do curb gutter and half the street gets assessed to the property owners. So instead of doing that in those neighborhoods, they're actually using money from this program to reduce those costs to the property owners. Oshkosh is really creative, so is Menasha and Neenah, creating what they call healthy neighborhood initiatives. And, you know, the one thing that they all have in common, they actually went through and did a housing study first. And through that housing study, kind of identify what the needs of the community were. So a lot of different programs out there. And if you decide to take the one-year extension for affordable housing, you can reach out to all these folks, and I'm sure they would share everything with you. And you can bring that back and have a discussion where it's best deployed in your community. Some places look at it and go, we want to bring in a new workforce housing development, and that's where the money will be deployed. But if there are struggling neighborhoods, it certainly can be used for those as well. So a variety of projects out there. I touched on this already. I don't want to get into all the numbers. This is TIP 4 termination budget considerations. Again, these numbers are going to change in a week. This is how I got to the map for that $370,000 bump in the levy that will be allowed. It's a pretty simple calculation. You just got to go through it, and those numbers will change a little bit. But that's how I got to the $370,000 increase in the levy that would be available. So far, questions? What questions do you have? I know it's a lot. It's a lot. I know. I'm sorry. Tim gave me a laundry list of stuff to do.
It's important stuff.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, as far as like affordable housing, if you designate an area, I mean, can we designate the whole city, or is it restricted outside of the existing TIDs?
It could be anywhere throughout the community. It doesn't have to be in the TIDs at all. So it's anywhere throughout the community. A lot of people they'll look at census tract information to determine where the highest need is in the community, and that might be one area how you narrow it down to a neighborhood. But there's a different approach everywhere. I can tell you that I've had 3 or 4 communities that are using it to bring in. There's a program called the tax credit loan moderate income housing tax credit program, operated by WHEDA, WHEDA in Wisconsin. And there's a handful of really great developers out there that do really amazing projects. And it can be used to help kind of draw in a developer like that. So it can be used for existing housing stock, but you may want to narrow in the search a little bit using census tract information.
Do these areas used for development, do they have to be contiguous?
No, they don't. Unlike TIF, right, where everything's got to be contiguous, this can be a little more of a shotgun approach as to where the need is.
Is that what you?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking.
Yeah, it's not in the boundaries. It could be, I mean, it could be a program that's opened up, and then you get to that 30%, you know, one of those criteria I talked about, a median income kind of situation. You can look at those criteria, and, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can deploy the funds.
Maybe we could have Tim educate us on a meeting about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I think we'll have a meeting, sort of a discussion about this probably in the next couple months as well.
I have a question. How do you get the data that explains what a household's gross monthly income is? Is that something that's just out there that you can find? For affordable housing, you need a household's gross monthly
Right.
income.
Again, I'll call them guidelines that were established as part of the statute when it came to TIF. They had established some guidelines around how the program was going to be used. I think the issue here they're trying to drive at more than anything else is these are folks that don't have the financial capability to be able to make necessary improvements in their houses. is it done through it's probably gonna be done through some type of application with them, would be my guess.
I think, Mike, the answer you're looking for is how does that financial information get compiled in order
Yeah,
to
who
determine
compiles it?
eligibility? And we're doing that through MSA, which is contract service that does our revolving loan fund processing, MSA, I'm sorry.
Sure.
That they get all the confidential information, put it into their list of checking off things, and then we get a summary from them. They qualify them. We don't see that detail information. When the program came out, that burden was on us, and no one would apply because they don't want you knowing that. Well, I don't want you knowing it either. So there became another vehicle for that. So the answer you're looking for is that that's a service group that works with the applicant, and then that determines the eligibility. That's why I asked the question,
Yeah.
can we,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. And that's why, because you might have only 2 houses in a whole block that fit that category. So we can't take the whole block. We don't want to take the whole block. Yeah. Good question.
Other questions? Trying to wrap up pretty quick here. There's 2 more topics that I really wanted to touch on. One was levy limits. Again, which will dictate a great deal when it comes to your budget process, especially in 2020, budget year 24, for 24. As I indicated last year, net new construction allowed you to increase your budget by $47,000, and that was it. So, and with the inflation pressures we all have seen, it certainly was not enough, and that's why when the TIF closes, there will be a substantial opportunity for the city to kind of get caught up. This kind of gets into all the issues, but a lot has been made about increased state share of revenue, and I think everybody's probably aware that's going to hit in 25 budget. So 24 budget will be tight again. I don't think there's any question about it. But then that exciting slide I told you about, that's coming. So that gives you the, it'll give it a little more of a roadmap. So that's, one thing is levy limits. And then the second is expenditure restraint, which it includes the general fund expenditures plus transfers to different funds, and allows you to be able to capture shared expenditure revenue from the state. So last year was a banner year. You were at 8.373%. This year, my guess, roughly around 6%. So in many years, even if you could increase your budget, expenditure restraint would restrict your ability to. And last year, and it's partly because of where CPI is, Consumer Price Index, last year that wasn't a restriction for once. This year it will not be a restriction again. Our guess, I think Consumer Price Index will be somewhere around 5.4% this year, ballpark. And then you'll have some net new construction as well. So, there is that future budget consideration. So, just kind of something to think about as you start doing your planning. 24 budget, which is coming up. I don't see a lot changing. I think you'll have restrictions, significant restrictions again in your ability to increase your levy because of levy limits. State share revenue hasn't kicked in yet, but you will have the anticipated year-end TIF distribution of approximately $800,000 of available cash. That will happen in 2024. And normally what happens is you adopt the resolution and then you go through a final audit. That'll take some time, and usually by fall, maybe mid-fall, you'll actually have the disbursements actually take place. So they'll be towards the tail end of 24, but you'll have this infusion of around $800,000 that could be deployed for capital or, again, whoever you decide. In 2025, you have the potential affordable housing revenue of 2.3 million. Again, it has to be deployed appropriately with those restrictions. But you'll also, that'll be the year you see the increase in state share revenue. And I don't know, Tim, if you looked at what that number is.
Yeah, it's mid 200,000s.
About 200,000, okay. But it's enough to make a difference when it comes to budget time. So those will happen. And then in 2026, likely 26, if you take the affordable housing extension, is the year you'll have the big bump in your levy of roughly 370,000, and you'll have the drop in the mill rate from the closure of TIN number 4. Now, those could occur in 25 if you don't do the affordable housing extension. But you have really kind of good news for all three of those years, the budget years coming forward, that should make it a little bit easier to get through budget cycles, and not as tight as it's been over the last probably decade plus. So anyway, there's my good slide. That's the positive wrap up right there for the city. It actually is they're in a pretty good position going forward. I think that's the last slide. Any final questions, comments, anything you want to add, Tim?
No, nothing to add. I think we're going to be starting strategic planning actually beginning tomorrow, and I think, a lot of this really kind of helps tailor that as we're moving forward. So.
One thing I've mentioned again to Tim is that, when the mill rate drops due to the TID foreclosure, in either 25 or 26, depending on what you do with the affordable housing, that is a time you have a significant capital expenditure. I mean, significant in the Northeast kind of thing. Not gonna get anybody excited. A new fire station or whatever it ends up being. That would be the time you do something, because you're already going to see this drop in the mill rate. So that's when you have the opportunity to take on some large capital expenditure and not see much of a drop, but maybe kind of level out that drop and get something done in the community that's been maybe something you've been wanting to do, a legacy project of some sort. So the planning for that really should be 24, and then make that decision as you kind of get through the year.
Good. Thank you very much, Phil. It's a lot to digest, especially for some of our newer council members that maybe haven't been through this before. This is a once in multi-generation opportunity that shows the success of TIFs and TIF 4 in particular, which is quite amazing. It really gets us to the point where, as Phil said, we now have the creative flexibility that we want to do. And unfortunately, or fortunately, use it or lose it. And we will use it, I guarantee you. That's definitely what we're going to do. So if you have questions that come up afterwards, by all means, get in touch with Tim, and he can walk through a couple things. The timing is on our side, certainly, but we do have to be frugal about this in how we create all the things that we've talked about for the past couple of years. And it's quite an opportunity for us. So it's working out the way it's supposed to, and we're certainly pleased with that. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Appreciate it.
I did okay, you didn't fall asleep.
Well,
I was kicking him.
That's true, just a couple times.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Have a safe
Thanks, Phil.
drive. So by all means, you can touch base with Tim on that. It is a deep subject, and it's not easily understood. So don't be bashful about that. Moving on to item 9, the chair will entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 per N1 per NG, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved regarding the claim from David Brown.
I'll move that we go into closed session.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion on going into closed session? Clerk will call the roll for closed session, please.
Gilson.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Maybe a month ago.
Okay, for the record, we are now back in open session. Moving on to item 11, Chair will entertain a motion on closed session item.
Mayor,
Alderman
I'd
Hildebrand.
like to make a motion to deny the claim from David Brown.
I will second that motion.
We have a first and a second to deny the claim as presented by David Brown. Any discussion? Clerk will call the roll, please.
Tauschik,
Yes.
Penkwitz,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Shilsky,
Yes.
Gilson,
Yes.
Hildebrand.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make motion to adjourn.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We stand adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.